Okay, welcome to our second segment dito sa episode natin, and it's about understanding China. And we got a very good perspective on the cultural difference between the Philippines and Filipinos and China from a lady who has come back for a Christmas break dito sa Pilipinas and will be going back to China to study under a Chinese scholarship program. Chinese law, can you imagine that? And we had an interesting discussion off cam, which we will later go into. But before we go to that, let's ask Attorney Diane Lipana kung saan siya nag-graduate ng law. You are now a lawyer, you've finished the bar, and so on. Please help the audience get acquainted with you.
Sure. I've had my background before law school as I went to the University of the Philippines, and I went to the School of Economics.
High school mo, saan?
Pasig, St. Paul, Pasig.
St. Paul,
and then I went to UP for the School of Economics for...
nag-eco ka,
Opo,
pero tinapos mo? Or,
yes, sir.
So you have economics degree, law degree?
Yes, sir.
And ano pa, Masters of Law now?
Yes, sir. And then...
What would yung Masters of Law mo is in Chinese?
Yes, sir.
Chinese law, okay.
Yes, sir.
Mabigat yun but economics and law, does it really follow?
Yes, sir. If you can imagine, when we speak of the law, what we usually imagine is we want to maintain social order because we want progress for our citizens, and that's why economics is very important because that's what you want to bring. That's what you want to bring to your people. So that goes hand in hand.
But is it a preparatory course for law?
Not required.
Accepted?
Under our current...
Like philosophy. Philosophy qualifies you for law, di ba?
Under our current laws, po, any pre-laws, you have no restrictions. Any four-year law degree, four-year undergraduate degree makes you eligible to apply for a law school.
Okay. So then you studied law in Ateneo.
Yes, sir.
That's how many years? 4 years naman yun,
another 4 years of law
ka.
school.
Tapos you worked in the private sector
Yes,
first?
I was working with the private sector for a year.
While you were preparing for the bar?
Right after the bar, a week after the bar, I was invited to join a firm, so I was with the firm in the private sector for a year. And then when I had the opportunity to be finally in the government service, I did. And then now, but fortunately, I was offered the scholarship by the Chinese government.
So yung mga gustong mag-scholarship sa China, how does it happen? Do they publish a list of scholarships?
They do. Everyone, I can just check the Chinese government. It's called CGS, it's a Chinese government scholarship. There are a lot of opportunities there, not only limited to lawyers. You can study public policy. You can study Chinese languages. You can. The program varies, so it depends on what your interests or what you want to cater to. There are a lot of programs which you can enlist in. The scholarship is pretty generous to the ones interested to advance their academic pursuits.
Yeah, we have had scores of students, Filipino students in China coming back here and interviewed here. And they have this China-Philippines or Philippines-China Friendship Club.
Yes.
You're aware of some of the members there, you're acquainted, but have you been a member of that club?
Yes, very recently.
Right now.
The community is not very large, but they're very...
How many kayo ngayon?
Well, now maybe the active ones would be about 150 people, I think, the active ones, because people usually move in and out of China, and I'm based in Beijing, so there are a lot of people also in Beijing. We will also exchange information on, let's say, if you need help, let's say, with employment concerns or student concern or visa concerns. These are actually good channels to exchange information.
People who are not students but working in China can be qualified for the club also?
Yes.
Okay. And you have met some of the working Filipinos there?
Yes, I have met a couple of them. They usually have fundraising events, university like caravans. They visit universities, and sometimes the embassy would also host events. Let's say, at one point I was in an event where they had an information campaign for Filipinos working in Beijing to inform people what do you do in case you're, let's say, a crime has been committed or somebody has offended you. or you have a, let's say, employment concern. Just to remind people what are the legal requisites when you're in China, just to make sure your citizens are safe.
Okay. And before we go into the discussion of law and so on, you were telling us about the culture, it's not shock, but the transition, no, to fears, some fears, into understanding, finding out the commonalities as well as the differences in culture. You were telling us earlier, can you repeat that for the audience?
Sure, sir. Let me just give it, let's say progress it this way. When I got invited to the scholarship, I had a preconceived notion of what China is, or maybe, or let's say who the Chinese community is in the Philippine setting. So my knowledge is very limited. I've been to China before, but not this type of immersion.
You've been to China before for 2-3
yeah,
days?
traveling. I mean, it's very limited. And now I explained to a while ago that understanding the Chinese, because I'm under the Chinese law program of Peking University. Understanding Chinese law is not just understanding the law itself. Even for the Philippine laws, it helps you appreciate. It also, sorry, not helps you. It asks you to appreciate the history, let's say the history, the political, the economic motivations of let's say, of their legislature, of their government, of their citizens, why their laws are like this. So that's why when I went to China, I did not have enough background. So I reserved my judgment for it. And good thing that I reserved my judgment, because it allowed me to have a more open mind on how to appreciate studying Chinese laws. As I explained to you a while ago, for our program, the idea is that they want us to, they're introducing basic Chinese laws, may it be constitution, they're criminal. They're, like the Philippines, they're also a civil law system, but well, as I mentioned, the difference is that even in the Philippines, we're civil law, but there are common law principles that we also apply in the legal system in the Philippines. But in China, there's civil law, but there are some common law doctrines that they apply, but not as wide as we apply it in the Philippines. Let's say jurisprudence. In the Philippines, we respect jurisprudence as part of the law of the land. So case laws or precedents are not just persuasive, but they're called precedents. They're called stare decisis. Once a law has been decided this way, we can expect that decisions in the future will be decided in that manner unless the Supreme Court reverses that ruling. In China, case decisions are more persuasive than precedents. As I was explaining to you earlier, this is both an advantage or disadvantage for China, for the Chinese government setting.
So, to make it more concise,
sure.
Jurisprudence has limited value. It's because in the first place, they don't have that long a history in jurisprudence under the present system that they have.
Yes.
So when you say persuasive, it's really based on the arguments as they go along.
Yes. I mean, because when it means persuasive and then precedents, when it's precedents, it's binding. So you can, it directs the conduct of the people, it directs the conduct, let's say, of your judges. They know that a certain issue has to be decided in this manner because a precedent exists. Or if a precedent does not exist, you raise the issue to the Supreme Court, who has the judicial power of review.
I'll bring up a practical issue, which we also discussed with some Chinese law scholars, and always the problem of when the party makes a decision, how much of it can be subject to the rule of law. Because this is a political decision. But even in the Philippine setting, you have political decisions that overwhelm all legal considerations, di ba? Pero mas lalo siguro sa China because the rule of the Communist Party. Any nuance there?
I think it's hard to say that. Well, I don't think we can deny that it's a party state. So China, the party has a big role in the governance of China. I cannot personally attest as to, let's say, how a particular party policy is translated, let's say, into a specific court decision. But literature would tell you that since, let's say, members of the court or members of the, because if you see the structure, the judicial system, the members of the court are, let's say the judges are appointed by their local, let's say a local court, is appointed by their local People's Congress. And the People's Congress are, most of them, if not all, are actually party members.
That's right.
So you cannot really detach on how far the extent of the influence of the party is in their judicial dealings.
Listening to your description now, my impression is that their judicial system is populist, still drawing from the People's Court. Unlike us, we draw from legal traditions, Roman law and so on and so forth, tapos pinasok dito sa atin. Doon, I remember kasi yung Revolutionary Court, People's Court, no? And if this is appointed, these are appointees, the judges are appointees from the People's Congress, it's sort of an expanded People's Court. Anyway.
Well, actually, it's more complicated than that. If you look at their judicial system, it's completely far from what we have. If you just imagine, we have separation of powers, and separation of powers is not one of the, let's say, doctrines or declaration of principles in the Chinese Constitution. Opo.
Okay, and I had a question, but we're not limited to the legal questions lang dito. No?
Yes.
But on the rule of law, I remember in my last visit there, or previous to the last visit, one of the reasons why they say they're putting priority on the rule of law now is because they say the economic progress of China cannot be sustained without the rule of law. You know, what we discussed earlier, the predictability of law for businesses.
Yes.
What can you shed on that? What light can you shed on that?
That's very true. There are a lot of, let's say, a lot of literature and a lot of even guests that come to China. Let's say, usually with let's say their Western background, would always say that the value of rule of law, and even the Chinese professors or academics, and even the ones active in the government would also, even the National People's Congress, they just recently issued they recently issued their position of the value of the rule of law, because they think that I think it's basically because of globalization.
That's
that,
right.
Because you want to be, there are a lot of international standards that you have to meet, and because China recognizes their position in the global sphere, they know that China wants to sustain this cooperation or this relationship or this collaboration, and without let's say assimilating to the rule of law or rule by law. How can they do that? Because you want the investors to trust or think that investing in China is not a risky venture anymore. But
you know, all the investments to China have been made the past 30, 40 years when the rule of law wasn't that clear either, and they've progressed so far, di ba?
But I think
that's why they explain it by saying it cannot be sustained
Yes.
without the rule of law. In
Yes.
other words, they've achieved this,
Yes.
but to keep it and keep on
Yes.
moving forward, they need some predictability.
we have to understand that, let's say, well, I'm not the expert, but the party, the Chinese Communist Party, wants to see itself their 2-century goal. The first century is they want the China to have a middle
2-century goal, ah?
Yes, 2-century goal. The first century
200 years yan, ah?
Yes, the first 100 they want to achieve a middle range prosperity, and I think they're nearing that already. And for the next 100, they want to level up.
Tayo Pilipinas, how many years
Nako,
goal na tayo?
yun nga eh. I think we have to at least to a certain extent, we have to emulate that. We have to be forward-looking. That's why I think they're preparing them. That's why even if you're saying, but the investments has been pouring in for the last 3 decades. So why are we moving into another let's say structure? Because I think they see that to achieve their goal for the next century, this is where they should move. So that's why they're opening themselves more. That they opening themselves the possibility that the value of the rule of law, the value of being more predictable, the value of transparency.
Question. Sa Pilipinas, we get this problem also of the municipal law versus the international law.
International.
How do they handle it in China?
They value more, I think, from my perspective, from what I've learned so far, China still gives primacy to their domestic laws.
Shouldn't that be also for the Philippines?
I think for any country, because for your if you value your sovereignty, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm not an expert in international law either. But there are how do you say this? There are things not well. If it's a dispute between municipal law and international law, if you have your domestic laws. We should give primacy for domestic laws, but there are times that, let's say, for the stateless, we don't have laws.
Well, this of course becomes very real in the issue of the founding, and so on.
So there are international laws which we also, because we under the Philippine Constitution we treat international law as our general principles of international law as parts of the law of the land. So these things we can adopt by indoctrination too. So,
yeah, okay.
So,
okay, we'll move away from the issue of Chinese law and so on. What about the culture? What was the transition that from fear to understanding?
For culture, I think, one, for the education, I think they value education so much. They put their students in a lot of pressure. I think compared to I thought I was academic. I had a fairly decent preparation for. Study habits when I was in Manila, studying in Manila. But the amount, because usually in other jurisdictions, the Masters of Law is not. It's not hard. It's, how do you say this? It's there's a steady level of demands for you, but it's not. I think it's extra challenging because it's Chinese law, because you're not familiar with the language. Well, the program is taught in English, but the literature that the academic system in the Philippines is more geared on the Western model. So it takes let's say for a Filipino lawyer, unless you're well acquainted with the history of China, or where they've been going through for the past, let's say, century, or the past at least half decade, it takes a lot of time for you to study.
Anong relevance nga pala ng ancient history of China to their interpretation and practice of law today? Meron ba?
Yeah, as I mentioned to you a while ago, what I found interesting when I was learning, let's say, the criminal law of China, they said that the first set of laws in China were penal law in nature. Because during, let's say, the Tang Dynasty, they wanted to promote social order. So they saw the value of having the Tang Code. So for let's say for the next few century, I think they were following the Tang Code, and even now, if you look at the penal code of China, some of them are rooted. Some of them are rooted in the Tang Code. That's very similar to the Philippine criminal law also, because we were under the Spanish rule. Some of our penal code are lifted from our Spanish roots.
Okay. What about yung cultural differences? Ano ba yung takot mo nung you were going to China? Yung poverty, you mentioned that earlier. But do you still see that in China today?
Well,
of course, in history, of course, we can see that.
In Beijing, the community, let's say near the university, is very developed. But they admit that if you go to the countryside, outside of the capital, outside the urban centers, poverty would. They explain to us that there's still such a thing called even similar to the Philippines. There's an urban and rural divide. So for the urban area, a lot of people are far better off than 3 decades ago when China had a closed economy. Life has improved for a lot of people. I think from 1978 when China opened, probably about 60% of their poor people has been lifted out of poverty. But still, there are a lot of people in the rural area. There are a lot of still peasants in the rural area. What I was explaining to you about the understanding China, when their laws were created, they were at the point where they had like nothing. Because remember when they were under the Cultural Revolution, a lot of laws were abolished. Let's say the Ministry of Justice was abolished, and then when eventually they had the legal reform, and then when they adopted they changed their economy from planned economy to a state capital economy. That's when they started opening up. So, and it surprised the whole world, because what they achieved in the last 3 decades, let's say superpowers like the hegemonies like of Europe and of America, it took them probably hundreds of years to get there.
Itong tension between China and the Philippines, is this real? Among the people to people?
In the academic sphere po, you don't.
Wala
po, opo. I think in the academic sphere and even in the economic sphere, you don't feel it. Because we just recently had APEC in the Philippines. And this issue was not discussed because everyone knows that the political issue and the economics are two different. I mean, separate issues and have to be dealt with separately, and we have, let's say, sub judice. We have to respect that the political issues are already raised before the international courts. Maybe we should respect that system.
Well, there are certain questions I want to raise because you are now a candidate or officially an FSO, Foreign Service Officer ng Department of Foreign Affairs. No? So you have to conduct yourself as an officer already in the department. But itong relations ng Pilipinas and China, I think has been improving, especially after the signing of the AIIB founding member. Can you comment on that as an individual, of course?
I think with our accession to the AIIB, I think what we have to look at is that we have, as I raised a while ago, we should not muddle the issue, or we should not confuse the issue. Because let's say for the AIIB, we should treat it like ADB or like any other financing institution which would help the Philippines in their infrastructure programs. There are economic concerns that we have to deal with, and I think that's we do not know how AIIB yet how the programs will be packaged. We just have to be vigilant about it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who have qualms about, let's say, the Philippines being part of AIIB, engaging in these projects covered by AIIB. But what we have to look at is that this is an opportunity for infrastructure programs that we really need. The Philippines has been significantly growing in the past 5 years, but we need more. We just have to look at our roads, our transportation system, our telecommunication systems. We need a lot of infrastructure to be where we are and to be where we want to be. And we need good leaders to bring us also there.
Last 30 seconds.
Sure, sir.
What would you want to convey to our audience, our people? To everyone, or to everyone who have the opportunity to learn more, to learn more outside of, let's say, learn more abroad, feel free to engage yourself. Feel free to learn, and then what I suggest is you bring it back. Because I think there's a value in technology transfer. Whatever you learn from abroad, find a way to bring it back, and then find a way to be of service to your country. Okay, so maraming salamat. You'll be back in China by when? This month?
In a few days, sir.
Hanggang kailan ka naman doon?
Until the program ends po in
Which
July.
is within the year? July.
Yes, sir.
So how many months ka all in all there?
It was 1 year. It was a 1 year
因为讲
program.
普通话了。
I think
一点点。
我不知道。一点点。
一点点。Okay, maraming salamat.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's a good start for 2016 for us with our interview with Diane and with our presidential aspirant, Lito David. So have a good weekend, and look for us also if you want to review the discussion on YouTube. Maraming salamat and have a good weekend.